everyone, I'm Bianca.
And I'm Byron.
Welcome to the Self-Made Book channel. Today we are speaking to the amazing Winston Ben Clements, who is probably best known as an internationally acclaimed speaker.
TEDx.
A man that has done a TEDx that has how many people?
Oh, just 60,000.
Oh, just 60,000
Okay.
people have
Casual
watched
day.
it. Tell us a little bit about you first.
Right. Okay. Thanks for the welcome. So maybe the thing, or maybe the place to start is with my story. So what maybe makes me a little bit unique to some people is I was born with a condition known as brittle bone disorder, which meant that by the age of 12, I'd broken over 150 bones. I know you play football, Byron, and you probably had a few injuries. So imagine 150 bones. It's not a fun place to be. But despite all of that, I guess you could call it physical trauma. I was able to get through my education, go to uni, worked for large corporations in financial services, consulting. And nowadays, as you touched on, my mission is to help 1 billion people unleash their full human potential as a motivational speaker. And I'm fortunate to have been, invited to various places, both in the UK and abroad, to work with various groups. And I'm really happy to be living my purpose.
Amen to that.
That's an excellent target.
Yeah.
1 billion people.
Do you know what I love about Winston? He came. We was working with you, and now you're this. You're a big show. We don't hear from you no more. 6 months we work. No longer than 6 months.
A year.
We worked with you for a year, and now we don't see you anymore.
They do say fame changes people.
Well, I know that. I can't hear from you anymore. So you're talking even internationally now. Tell us some of the places you've been speaking.
Yeah, the most interesting place I've spoken is Canada, which was about a few months ago. And what made it super interesting actually was that it was really cold. Nobody told me about the minus 36 degree temperature.
Oh, so it's snowing constantly.
Snowing, it's the place is frozen. It's just a constant blizzard. But
I bet they cope though.
I bet if everything
Nothing
is normal.
stops working.
they do,
did it?
like traffic is moving, people are going to work. It's none of this, 2 inches of snow in London and everything stops.
Yeah.
But it was really fun also because of the group that I worked with. They were super engaged, and funnily enough, I still talk to quite a few of them on Facebook. They keep in touch, so that was super interesting. And then the other one that I've got coming up at the end of the year is actually another TED Talk, and it's going to be in Brussels. So I'm excited to kind of spread my message to Europe, even after Brexit.
And what is your topic of conversation when you're doing these talks? When you're doing in fact, let's start with that. What is your topic of conversation for your talk?
Yeah, so I have a couple of topics that I specialize in. One is around emotional intelligence, which is resilience, and how it relates to productivity and stress management in the workplace. Because obviously, if you're resilient, then you're not getting stressed by situations at work, which means that you're taking hopefully less days off and being more productive, which is what the CEOs want to hear, right? They want you to be at your best. And then the other one is to do with inclusion and how we can foster inclusive cultures in organizations and bring those different threads of diversity around the table to foster that innovation and hopefully give that company a competitive edge within their market. So
who are the types of organizations that are booking you? Like what's their kind of angle, or is there a pattern appearing?
I think it depends. So, and you might relate to this as well, Bianca. So some of the bookings come around specific, events. So like this week we had Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK. Actually, it's global, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And so I've had requests to come and talk about resilience and stress and well-being because of this time that we're in. Other times it could just be because a company is focusing on a specific initiative that year. Just use a different example. Emotional intelligence might be a big thing for a corporation. So they might bring me in to, talk about something around emotional intelligence. So it just totally depends. Yeah.
And the first TEDx you did, what was this topic there?
The first TEDx that I did, the backstory to that is actually, at that point, I was just experimenting as a speaker. Because what happened is I was working full-time, 9 to 5, and I had to do this presentation at work just to about 6 or 7 people. And I was absolutely shit. Can I say that?
You can. You said it now.
Too late now.
Yeah, I was rubbish, and but then instead of letting that experience deflate me, I thought, actually, how can I get better at this thing? Because I've kind of always wanted to be on a public stage, but I hadn't had the exposure. And then when I had the exposure, I sucked. So I thought, okay, I need to kind of go back to the drawing board. And so I went to this thing called Toastmasters, which you might have heard of, and which is a public speaking meetup where you learn how to present. And in there, I met with somebody who later became a mentor. And one of the challenges that he gave me was, hey, you know what? You need to think bigger than Toastmasters. Why don't you apply for a TEDx? And I was like, yeah, then speak to 6 people.
And is that because he saw or she saw something in you that?
I believe so.
Yeah.
He thought my message was bigger than for a group of 20, right? He thought I should be looking to have a wider impact and helping more people. So in the end, I applied for the TED Talk just to kind of get him off my back. I hope he's not watching this. Sorry, Glenn.
Yeah, I've done things just to get him off my back. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what happened was, I did the TED Talk, which the title was Your Limitations Are an Illusion, which kind of ties in with my big theme of helping 1 billion people overcome whatever boxes, society or they themselves have put themselves in. Using a lot of my personal story for that. And then what happened from there is I had organizations reach out to me and say, hey, Winston, could you come and do that thing you did on that, what is it, TED? And I was like, yeah, I'll come along. And they were like, okay, how much do you charge? And I was like,
you like charge?
pay to do this?
Yeah.
And now I'm here today.
Amazing.
I love that.
So let's just say there's 1 billion people watching right now.
Sure they are.
And yeah, that's what we need. And you want to share a message with them. What is that message going to be?
So many messages.
Which camera should you do? This one here. This one here.
That one there.
That one there, yeah?
Go on.
So the message would be to start before you're ready. And in the same way that, for example, using my speaking journey, I did that first talk. That was shit. I'm going to say it again. And then instead of letting that experience hold me back, I then decided, how can I turn this experience into something that is more, that can help me to be successful? And I think a lot of people watching this, I guess, will be entrepreneurs. And one of the biggest things that has enabled me to grow in business and in my speaking business is to just put myself out of that comfort zone. In business, it might look like testing something before you actually commit to it. So I know, for example, there's people who want to develop these amazing mobile apps that, bring world peace and all these kind of things. They solve a massive problem. Before you pay a developer £10,000 to build that thing for you, just do a little test, do a survey, speak to friends and family, speak to those affected by the problem and see whether that's something that they would like to consume. And in the same way that I was able to sort of test my message at Toastmasters, you then might realize actually there's legs in this and you can aim for a bigger and broader platform.
I think that's really great actually, and I think sometimes entrepreneurs solve problems that don't actually exist.
Yeah.
And they spend all this money creating all these wonderful solutions to a problem that in fact they just encountered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't think about, okay, well,
who else has this problem?
who else really has this problem? But not only who has the problem, who's willing to pay for the problem
Or for the solution.
or for the solution.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really
And pay
interesting
the
point.
money that you want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great, as you say, world peace and everything else. But you still have to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Unless you are a billionaire and have loads of money, and that's different conversation.
Yeah.
And you can just do what you want there. But in most cases, it's probably not the case. So I think that's a really, really important message. No.
So start before you're ready.
Start before you're ready. Do it now. Do it now.
No time like the present.
Yeah.
So that was the first TED. Are we allowed to know what the second
That
one
was
is
the
about?
first TED. I don't know if you are actually.
Okay, that's fine.
Need to read my contract. I can tell you the theme.
Yes.
Okay.
The theme is the untruth about X, and then X is a topic.
Okay.
So it's almost challenging conventional thinking on a particular theme. So it could be the untruth about entrepreneurship, for example. And I'm not going to say any more than that.
So I mean, so you know-ish the topic. So how do you, as a speaker, go about preparing to write that TEDx talk
or any talk?
Yeah, I think you have to start with what you're good at, where your expertise lies. So, for example, there's no point in me talking about personal branding because that's not my area. That's your area, right? And I think as a speaker, and I think in business, it's common knowledge that you're better served by niching down and becoming an expert in one thing than a jack of all trades. So in terms of the prep itself, I normally do an outline. So almost like writing a book, you get the chapters down, have your manuscript in a way, and you have that skeleton version of the talk. And then what I do is I'll refine it. So I'll literally share it with other speaker colleagues and say, this is where I'm looking to take my arguments. Does that make sense to you? And then they might say, actually, that's good, take that out. And then I make tweaks at that stage, because it's a lot easier to tweak an outline than to actually tweak something that you've fully fleshed out and practiced. And I think this kind of ties in with, the experimenting and testing ideas of entrepreneurship. And then, once I'm happy with my outline, then I can actually write it proper. For TED Talk, I would actually write the entire script because they're very strict on timing. So I need to know exactly how long it's going to be. I'm not allowed to go over 18 minutes.
So you have to memorize it, essentially.
You pretty much. But I approach memorizing in a way that, you don't want it to feel robotic because that's the danger with memorizing. And actually, when I prepare for my other talks for keynotes and corporations, I just have
some outlines in your mind.
Yeah. I know which stories I'm going to tell. I know what points I'm going to make. I know which exercises I'm going to make them do. But I kind of give myself freedom to how I'm going to deliver it on the day. But with the TED Talk, you haven't got such luxury.
That's the thing with that's always in the back of my mind. With the TED, it's a much more controlled environment.
It is.
And there's no editing. I don't know if they edit. Do they edit anything?
It depends on the event. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're doing a talk in front of a corporate client, if you want to have a glass of water or check in, you can do stuff to remind you. But with a TED, it's one take.
It's one take, and
it's got to be flawless.
Yeah, and also it's not just about going over the time limit. I think they'll even ask you before. So, for example, I think mine is going to be a 12-minute talk. The limit is 18. If I tell the organizer it's going to be 12 minutes, then
it needs to be 12
it
minutes.
should be around 12 minutes.
Okay. Any leeway? Do they give you that?
I think you get something very small, like a minute, up or down. Yeah. So yeah, to the letter.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's tough. So,
it's tough. Yeah.
So where's our TEDx intro? What's going on?
Oh yeah. We'll talk after this.
See, people, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? You got to put people out of their comfort zone.
Do you want to do a TEDx?
I don't really want to.
I was going to say, I thought you said you didn't want one.
No, it's not my bag.
I think you should.
No, you should. I think everyone.
What would you say I talk about?
I think you talk about the untruth about entrepreneurship.
What would you say I talk about?
I think something along the lines of changing the trajectory of your future. So essentially, your background may not be, all bells and whistles, private school, luxuries, but actually that doesn't mean your future has to be the same. I think you can change the trajectory of your future.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to put this out now.
All right.
Doing a TEDx is not high on my agenda unless the topic is absolutely right.
Yeah.
However, I'm very interested in being a TEDx organizer and having my own TEDx.
If you're a TEDx organizer, you can't do your own TEDx talk.
And I'm fine with that.
But I just told you a really good title for
I'm
your
going to
talk.
have all of my, have all my people.
This is my life, Winston. You asked me for a talk. I give you a great topic, like you're stellar, off the top of the dome, right there, right?
It's actually pretty straightforward to become a TED organizer.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's probably easier than getting a talk.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. You just need a venue and some people.
Do you feel that's devalued it though? Because I feel like there's so many people doing TEDx's now. Before it was quite exclusive.
Yeah.
But because there seems to be one in every area and corner.
Yeah, that's true. I think there is a nuance though with TED. So there's a TED Talk, and then there's a TEDx.
Okay.
So TED level is invite only.
Okay.
You know, you'd have to be like a Simon Sinek or
And then
you know.
TEDx is the
TEDx is like a community organized
I see.
version to give those people with something to say in the community who might not necessarily get
Have
the
a voice.
invite
Mhm.
to the big conference, a platform to share their message.
Mhm.
I mean, both are great for credibility,
Mhm.
but yeah, there's definitely levels.
Definitely
So,
levels to
do
it.
you get to automatically go on the website and on the TEDx kind of
Yeah.
YouTube, regardless of how well your talk performs?
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing in terms of positioning.
Mm.
Whether you spoke in, you know, in Brixton or whether you spoke in, you know, Los Angeles
Mhm.
at the big conference, it all goes on the same website.
Mm.
Love that.
That's good for credibility.
So I'll get that sorted, and you guys can all come and speak at the TEDx.
At your special.
At my
Self-made
TEDx.
TEDx self-made.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All
So,
right, fine.
PA, if you're watching, make sure you
Make it
check a note.
happen.
Find a venue.
Find a venue.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Find an area that
Yeah.
only have one.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. It's
So-
gonna happen.
When we last spoke, we talked about some of your other topics that you were going to start speaking on.
Mm.
And I think resilience was always a big one for
Yeah.
you. What are the other topics that you really like to focus on?
Yeah, so nowadays the thing that I'm being asked for a lot is inclusion workshops.
Actual workshops as opposed to keynotes.
Yeah, actually, because people want to actually get really hands-on. And I think obviously with my background, I gave a talk on I&D, inclusion and diversity, where I made a joke that, you know, I'm basically HR's worst nightmare. I had this slide behind me and it kind of ticked like the race box, disability box, like all these other things that I came up with. It was hilarious. And so because of that reason, I get approached a lot.
Yeah.
But the way I approach inclusion is almost like, I don't want to be like a disabled rights activist.
Yeah.
I talk more around psychological safety, which is the idea that everybody should be able to feel free to express themselves.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're black, white, yellow, blue, whatever.
Yeah.
And I even stick up for the much maligned, you know, middle-aged white man and say, you know, why should he feel like he can't come to a Black Network meeting, for example. So that's the kind of the angle that I've come from, which is a little bit different and maybe a little bit unexpected given my background.
So what's next for you?
Well, after this?
What's the goal?
Not after this.
What's the goal?
In general.
So for me, I think it's continuing to reach as many people and help them.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we're doing now is a great way to do that. You know, whether it's podcasting, videos, or collabs like what we're doing. Of course, continue to grow the speaking business. And I'm also looking to do my own live events. So those will be coming up in, you know, hopefully the next 6 months or so. For people who are interested in learning more about speaking and particularly how to become a good and busy corporate speaker. Because I think there's not really, I struggled a lot to find the information when I was taking that journey. And so maybe some of my ideas will be beneficial for someone who is in that stage.
You're so right, because the world of speaking, it can be such a daunting world. I think it's kind of it's almost like Chatham House rules. No one wants to talk about how much they get paid. No one really wants to talk about what clients they have. And it can be, unless you know how to get onto speaking bureaus or you have contacts, it's quite a difficult world to navigate.
I think so. And I'm really open about stuff. People ask me how much they get paid. I said, I got paid $3,000 for that. And I think it's just so important to have that information there so that people know how to position themselves. I mean, it's not saying it to brag, it's just saying it to inform. Because I know a lot of speakers with a good message, and they're very, very strong speakers, but they just don't know how to enter.
They have to position themselves.
Yeah.
They haven't got great mentors.
Yeah, exactly. and the worst thing that you can do with the corporate is actually underprice yourself.
Yeah.
You go there and you say, you know, I'm going to charge you £200 for this.
They don't want you anymore.
They don't want you.
Yeah,
They'll think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that positioning, that piece on personal branding, credibility, positioning, is so firmly associated with cost. in the speaking world.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realise that, because to them, they look at it from a corporate perspective. Often people are coming out of jobs, right?
Yeah.
So they probably look at their salary, they work out their hourly rate, and they deduce that that speaking element is 20 minutes, therefore it's going to be, you know, the hourly rate divided by 100, divided by 60 times. But it doesn't work like that, because even what you said earlier about prepping for any talk, not an TED,
takes time.
You're doing your outline, you're creating the speech. So when people often come to us and they say, oh, can I get Bianca for 20 minutes? It's only 20 minutes. They don't realise actually it's not only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because
in fact, you spent the last
10 years, 7 years of experience.
7 years of experience, knowledge.
Plus my time outlining, creating, writing.
Travel time there, travel time. But you know they want you there 30 minutes early, you've got a mic up, all these things. And they say, it's only been 20 minutes. Because when I told them the price, they were like, oh, it's only going to be, we only have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what everybody says.
Yeah.
It's the expertise that you're paying for.
Absolutely.
And the work that has gone to developing that expertise.
Absolutely.
It's like boxing. How long is a boxing match? How much do they get paid?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're right.
Absolutely.
I mean, what was that? There was a boxing match we looked at going to, and I think the guy got knocked out in the first round, and I was so happy I didn't go. I would have been really upset. But hey, look, he got his money. But I would have been there like, really?
Yeah.
Could have strung this out for another 2 rounds.
Yeah.
But you're right.
But then you want to see a
get paid for
knockout, so it's like catch-22, right?
I don't want to see a knockout in the first round. I don't. No, I don't. I want to see
Not
some
first
sparring.
round.
Not the first round.
You want to go there, you want to feel some pain first.
When you sat down, or you went to get a drink.
Yeah. Or you've flown all the way to Vegas
flown
or
to
something.
Vegas.
Yeah, and then you get 1 round.
Yeah, but they get paid for their expertise and their knowledge. So here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone would like to kind of get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably through my website, which is winstonclements.com, or just catch me on any social media platform at Winston Speaker.
So, Winston, before we wrap up, you get to ask us 1 question each.
Okay.
Throw something in here now. Doesn't mean we're going to answer.
Yeah, you have to.
Well, you know, we're going to throw it in there.
Yeah, sure. Individually or together?
It's up to you.
Up to you.
You're
Okay,
cool.
let's start with you, Byron.
Uh-oh.
Because you've been picking on me all in. What is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Business failure we're talking about.
Business, plus, you can go anywhere you want.
Yeah, so I think one of my most notable, what I always like to first say is, rather than failures, I have lessons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to just change narrative a little bit and how my mind works. So one of the things was one of my first businesses my first official businesses that I invested in, which was an estate agency. And that business actually failed. And it failed for a number of reasons. One of them was timing, because it was credit crunch time, 2008, which you couldn't do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other major factors was because I was too inexperienced to ask the right questions. And I didn't qualify my purchase. And I wasn't there, and as a result of not qualifying it, I wasn't disclosed information. And it wasn't because they were trying to hide that information. It was because the excitement of being an owner of an estate agency, I had emotion,
I'm excited.
and it was going to be like, I can be a partner in the same estate agency. The excitement of that versus the money that they were asking for, which wasn't a huge amount of money at the time. It was nearly all of my money, and it was like an explosion waiting to happen. And then I didn't ask the right questions that I would have normally or now with experience would ask and decipher that's not for me, and I would find out that information. So that was a major failure or learning experience for me, because I didn't qualify it correctly. You couldn't have predicted the credit crunch anyway. But it then led to one of my first business successes. So without that, I wouldn't have created an amazing network of people. One, in fact, came to our event last week. So a lady, she's like, she's a property developer, a wheeler dealer in the property world, right?
Okay.
And she taught me some, I would go in the car with her, she'll go to this property, and I was just learning, just taking up all this information. I would go with her to the solicitors. She actually came to our event and brought her daughter, who would have been in the car with me, like 10 years old. She's now a big woman, right?
Yeah.
And so that lesson and that learning experience, and if you want to use it for the purpose of the question, failure was partly my own fault because I didn't qualify it well enough and I had too much emotion versus, all this emotion and money. Like, thinking, okay, well, this amount of money, this amount of potential reward, I was sold the dream. And I just didn't qualify my purchase. Had I asked the right questions, I would have got the right answers. Because she wouldn't have not told me, but I didn't ask.
Sure.
It's not having that self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was probably my my biggest learning experience to date, or one of them. But we always have so many constant experiences, But that was is one of my notable ones.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. For you, Bianca, I'll make it easier.
I don't mind.
No, it's going to be tough. I would say, so I guess because you've had exposure on TV and maybe many people would consider you a public figure, and I presume you might have come across situations where people in your network or fans, followers, I'm sure most of them respond greatly to you, but I'm sure you also have that small minority who are maybe not so positive towards you. How do you deal with that? Because I guess there'll be many people watching who are starting to get exposure, whether it's through business or through media or social media, because you get so many social media stars nowadays. How do you cope with, I guess, the negative side of influence, if you can call it that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're right, the keyboard warriors are probably the worst. I think I've yet to have someone come up to me and be rude to my face. But I've had, numerous DMs and messages that were rude.
That's really interesting.
Because I think there's an element of, it's easy. It's easy to hide behind a computer and tap something nasty. To go up to someone, that's there's levels. That's impressive,
But
right?
you would respect that.
I would probably respect it, but I'd probably be shocked. Like, what do you do if someone's rude, curses you to your face? But how do you deal with it? It's interesting because after The Apprentice, and this, you could look at this as an error on my part, or you could look at this as the universal God doing his work, right? But there was a folder on Facebook Messenger, that if you don't click on it, it doesn't send you the messages from people who are not in your network. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's the ones that people in your network, you get those into your inbox, and there's another inbox. It filters. I didn't know that. So I didn't see any of these filtered messages until about a year after The Apprentice ended. But when I opened it, oh my gosh. The messages in there, go back to your country, you black this, you black that, you woman this, woman that, dick pics, everything. Everything was in this folder, right? And I remember then reading it, and it was awful. Like that feeling that people are angry. Like some of them were angry. Angry. Sometimes it was task by task. So I did something in a task, or I didn't do something, and people were so like task specific anger. It shocked me. It's TV. Calm down. It wasn't in your investment. Like, what's your problem? And then someone was just plain old racism, plain old sexism. And I think had I seen it then, it would have had more of a detrimental impact than me seeing it a year later. But even then, it was hurtful. And I think then I was 25, 26. I was quite young. I didn't really know how to deal with it. Luckily, I had great friends, family, and stuff around me to help me, to support me in that. But now, when I get the odd message that's a bit nasty or a bit now I'm like, really? My responses are so different. Because before I would just, delete it and put to junk folder. Now sometimes I just respond. Now, I don't know if that's better or worse. I'm like, so the other day I posted something, and this is not a nasty comment, but I posted something, I think it was about the high street not evolving and with their delivery processes and stuff, and not being able to get next day delivery in some big high street stores. And someone responded, "Oh, Bianca, with the ice caps melting and the fire in the Amazon, do you think this is important?" I was like, so my response was like, really? Then they deleted their comment. Because the reality is I'm a business person, so I'm talking about it in the context of e-commerce. And she was like, this is your first world problems. Like, if you don't like my page, don't follow. Don't comment. But that's now I'm able to have that philosophy because I'm older. I say all of this not knowing what will happen next month when the new show comes out. And it will start again.
That is true.
But I think that, looking at how some of the people like Love Island, I think, is a really good example of this.
Yeah.
The way they come out and they have superstar
Mm.
fame on
Millions of
Instagram, millions of
Yeah.
people.
And you know what?
I can't imagine.
I'm, as you know, I'm new to Instagram live
Yeah.
and posting and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Are you?
Yeah, I've always been really low
Yeah.
key, right?
Now he's like all over Instagram. You've not noticed.
It's a great tool. But in theory, you can never know how someone feels when some of these things are happening. And whilst I was there to support you and so on, and shield you by deleting messages or whatever, right? When it's aimed at you, it's a complete different experience.
Yeah.
So like, I get some really crazy people message me sometimes, and trolls. I'm just like, you took your time out of your day.
That's what is crazy.
To actually message me this. And you think about it for like a couple of minutes, you kind of like, but then you're like, you just get on with life. But it's on
easy
that
for you
big
to
level.
get on that big level, and I
It's
think
insane, yeah.
the psychology of it probably is if you might get 20 messages,
Right.
and 15 of them might be positive,
Yeah.
but you dwell on the 5.
Yeah.
Or
And
that
it's
one.
or you dwell on the 1, and it's hard not to be like that. And I think that's what's scary. So.
Yeah, so what would the advice be for maybe somebody who's, I don't know, walked out of Love Island today, and
I think
they're now confronted with this whole new
I think potentially to have a social media manager that deletes some of the messages, if I'm honest, I think that would help shield you and protect you, but also to get some support and counselling, because genuinely it's become a problem, because a number of people have come out of those shows and have ended up being suicidal, committing suicide or having depression is quite significant. So I think it's come to a head now where I think you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately from a governmental or police or a social media company perspective, they're not really going to get involved. They're not doing enough really. So, and there's an argument, is it for them to do the work? But, so you have to take it on your own and get someone to help you. So. But what would you say? Resilience. What do you do about?
That's what it's all about. This is all about resilience.
Yeah, no, for me, one good piece of advice that I got from a coach I worked with last year, he said to me, Winston, he's an American guy, he said to me, Winston, the more your influence increases, the more followers you have. Even for someone as nice as you are going to have a segment of people who just want to hate on you for whatever reason, right?
It comes with the territory.
It comes with the territory of being in the public eye. But he said you should look forward to that day.
Okay.
Like what? Because that's the day you know that you're doing something right.
Okay.
Because if your message is resonating with everybody, then it's probably not hard hitting enough, right? It's like if you invent, the next, I don't know, loaf of bread, and everyone says, yeah, it's all right, and then nobody buys it. It's kind of like, yeah. So you want to get to a place where your message is actually polarizing to a level, so that you almost get to that group of loyal followers who will always look at your stuff, will always comment positively, and will be ultimately customers of your work, right? As opposed to being that person who's trying to please everybody, but not actually bringing anything through the door.
It's like being that Marmite, so they love it or they hate it.
Yeah.
So do you like Marmite?
No.
Good man. And on that note, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, I think we've said it already, but it's winstonclements.com and Winston Speaker everywhere else.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure, Winston. It's always good catching up with you anyway. But now he's a superstar. It's hard,
no longer
It's
our
hard.
mentees, now superstar.
So anyway, I've been Bianca.
And I'm Byron.
And he is
Winston.
All right, take care, guys. Bye.
Cheers, guys.